All right, good morning everybody. My name is Gregor Hofbauer, as introduced by Lisa. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for getting up at this hour, and I'm very excited to talk about today's or this month's theme, robots or robot. And I mean, some of you might have read the little bio I handed in, and you would maybe think, what qualifies me to talk about this topic? And I have a couple of confessions to make. First of all, I never wrote one single line of code in my life, especially, and I know that especially because somebody once told me HTML is not a programming language. So that was that. Also, I'm not an engineer of any sorts, and I don't work in the research of robotics. But who I am is actually a partner and creative director at Struct, or in German pronunciation, Struct. I never know how to pronounce it. And it's a multidisciplinary design studio here in Vienna. And we're mainly focusing on two things. First of all, it's important for us to help our clients to bring their messages across. And we don't really care what kind of tools we have to use to do this. And secondly, since a lot of our projects end up being interactive or in space or like at trade fairs or conventions, we had to really focus also on user experience design and often also on user interface design. So those are our two main fields of work, I would say. But I mentioned one word before, and it's not just hot air for us, it's really what we do. We work in a multidisciplinary field. If I say we work, it means that we theorize, we write concepts, we experiment a lot. Of course, we do design, we animate, we code, but we also build stuff. So the team at the Struct office, we're about 10 people, on and off, bringing freelancers in, of course. We have very diverse set of skills, and that makes working there actually quite fun. And if I'm asked what I'm doing, I tend to try to answer it in a really open way. We're working in the creative business, and actually, since we're doing often projects that might not feel very, common to maybe graphic designers or whatever, we had the chance to work with these two guys at some point, and I guess that's why I'm here, because we have two projects in our portfolio that dealt with robots. Very different kind of robots, small, big, in two very different kind of projects. But before I tell you more about the projects, I want to do a little wordplay or play with words, because I like to do that to keep you guys on your toes. So in this phrase that I use often, there's two words that I don't think are quite the opposite, but if you look more into them, they're not really the same. It's working and being creative. For me, working basically means that you're using tools, and in the best case, you know those tools, and you're applying skills that you have learned, that you strengthen, and you probably still are learning more about your skills or the stuff that you need to call it a skill. And you have to be focused, basically, to get shit done. And that's working, you just, at some point, you hope you're done with the project as well, I guess. Being creative basically means a couple other things to me. First of all, to experiment, because that's the fun part of being creative, to just try out new things. And if you do that, you're bound to fail, which is okay, because it makes you think, it makes you keep an open mind about things. And so those are two different approaches, I would say, of what you as a creative person can do. You can either get shit done, or you can fail and experiment and challenge yourself. If we look at working, for example, and then add the word robots to it, it becomes a little more interesting and maybe intimidating, because robots use their tools perfectly, because most of the time the tool for a robot is shaped for that robot and it just knows how to use it. Secondly, they don't have a learning curve. If you tell a robot what to do, it will do it until it stops doing it in the same quality that you told him to do it. The robot. And third of all, they can do it all the time. They never lose focus, they just do it. So in comparison to a human being, that is kind of scary, you could think. And that's why if you ask Google, will robots take our jobs, you get about 40 million hits about it. And I kind of fell in a little spiral when I did that and clicked endless amounts of articles, and sometimes you really hope it's a hoax. For example, Japanese engineers created a robot supposedly that should assist you in suicide. It looks like a teddy bear and it's really cute, but I really hope that's a hoax. If you want to read up on it, oops, you can use your QR code reader or just take a picture and use it later. The second one is definitely for real, and that's really scary. There's a noodle robot being made in China. And it's supposed to replace all noodle makers in China. That's what this guy is talking about in the video on CNN Money. So that's definitely not a hoax, because CNN, I think, would not dare to do a story about it. And I mean, you say you're a designer or maybe somebody else. NPR did a nice little interactive website where you can pick your field of work and then define what job you're doing, and then they're telling you how likely it will be that your job will be automated. So as a graphic designer, you only have an 8.2% chance that you're obsolete. So I think we can breathe now again. But I tell you, accountants have a tough life in the future. So if you're an accountant, you might want to change your work. Anyways, robots do obviously things way better than people, or sometimes longer or with more endurance, and that's why for the first project that I want to show you, we chose to use a robot at the end. But first of all, the Tian, a restaurant in the first district of Vienna, approached us because they have a lobby that during the day is their takeaway market, but at night, when a lot of guests actually arrive to have really nice vegetarian dinner, by the way, it looks kind of closed. It almost looks like the shop is closed, so you can't get into the store. And the owner approached us with the briefing that he wants to have this lobby being more lively and more inviting. And of course, for jobs like this, we go there, we check out the space, and we saw one really neat element. It's the chandelier in the middle. It's actually an art piece done by Schlicht Barock. And it's not an actual light, so it doesn't emit any light. It has candles on it, but it never burns, basically. So during the day, it looks really nice on the top left, but at night, there's other lights and brightening up the room, and the chandelier actually is dark. So our first idea was to, bring the chandelier to life. So we do field tests, and we brought a projector and thought, we're going to do a projection mapping because that's hot shit. But it turned out that it's not that easy because it's a very busy structure. But all of a sudden we realized, well, we're casting kind of interesting shadows. My colleagues dropped the projector and took a flashlight and basically only swung the flashlight, and it looked way more appealing to us than what we originally wanted to try. And then we showed that to our client, and he was really excited about it. And then we realized, well, obviously we can't have our colleagues stand there all night and swing a flashlight. So when you look, and I'm a lazy guy, I admit, I go to Wikipedia for my quotes. If you look there, though, this one is really good. Robots have replaced humans in the assistance of performing those repetitive, like swinging flashlight tasks, which humans prefer not to do, obviously, or are unable to do due to size limitations, because obviously we can't do this in the middle of the room, so we have to place it within the chandelier, and we couldn't afford a monkey to train, so we ended up using a robot. And as I told you, we're 10 people with various skill sets, but we're not always the best in doing things, but we know people who do it. And in this case, we teamed up with Gordo. He's a media artist, actually. If you can check out his website under yugo.at with a Y. And he's still doing fun things like the social media suicide machine, where you can delete all your social media accounts with one click. But he's also great in creating circuit boards and putting pieces together that actually create a robot. And we did some Arduino programming with him, and so I can run a little video here. We have a workshop at the office because that's really important for us. And we can try out things there, we can experiment. For example, we had to figure out which kind of LEDs we use. Yeah. We have some tools. Yeah, so we didn't want to burn down the house, so we had to figure out how hot this thing gets. And also, with the robot, we had a little joystick at the beginning to see what kind of range we can use and how it's moving and how smooth we can make this little guy work. And then we built a little basket and placed it within the chandelier. And you don't really see it. You have to look for it. It's a little dark here. You can find the video online later. But it actually did the job really well. It was kind of subtle and still magical at the same time, because it was a moving light, so the shadow that was casted was always changing. And we added a second LED light that had color LEDs to actually just combine it with the moving one. And we came back also to the idea with projection, but we spared the chandelier and created a generative program to create the typography out of the leaves. And there was also some patterns that we created. And since we were also working in the field of user experience design and interface design, we wanted to have the staff at the restaurant back end where they can change things so it's not getting boring. They were also able to change the words that you were displaying. So, for example, if a bigger party comes in, they can welcome the people there. And it was very easy. It's an HTML interface that they run on their laptop, and you could control everything with a wireless connection that was actually built into the circuit board of the robot. And yeah, that's how it looked like. And I'm happy you saw it here, because unfortunately after 2 years of use, the owner decided that he got bored of it. But actually, I can't change that. So yeah, coming back to my phrase, working in the creative business, there's still a second word we didn't touch. It's creative. And it becomes a little funny when you add the word robots to it. Because you question, is there such a thing as creative robots? And I would say if there are, then they definitely are an experiment. I've never heard of an actual robot that is supposed to be creative. And therefore I would say it's destined to fail, because robots are made for doing exactly the same thing in perfection over 1 million times. But if you experiment, you're supposed to fail, and I guess a robot wouldn't like to fail. Unfortunately, it also doesn't have a mind, so it can't keep an open mind. But I would like to spin this last phrase by saying I hope it actually at least has an open API, because for programmers it's important to be able to talk to things like this. And that's what was one of the biggest challenges for the next project, the long distance art that I want to talk about. The setup for this project was really interesting, as the whole project was actually. It was very uncommon. There was this artist, or is this artist, Alex Kisling. He's from Vienna. He's a painter, and he's a true artist, so he's always looking for new sources of inspiration. He's really fun to work with. There's one of our clients, the Vienna Tourism Board, and they have a strategy to promote Vienna as a destination by doing flagship projects in the markets they want to advertise in, and they do events more than, or actually they never do like any kind of standard advertising. So they need events that create media buzz, and obviously this whole idea comes from an agency, in this case Jungfirma Donau. And the idea for this whole project was that Alex Kisling, as an artist, is creating an artwork simultaneously in 3 different cities. That matches also really well the tagline of Vienna, now or never, oder jetzt oder nie. And therefore it was us that they asked to actually realize the whole thing. And the choice of using industrial robots for this project was merely made because it's the absolute contradiction to an artist working, because industrial robots obviously are made for producing the same thing a million times, for creating a lot of revenue and working in a business, and an artist tries to create something unique and often struggles with business, obviously. So it was the idea to create like a contradiction in the beginning. So we had to include this robot, or actually two of them, as our team members, because we knew that we can't have only the robot draw a picture, because we have this artist who's actually the most important person, or should be, in this project. So as you would do with any new team member, there's a couple of things you have to do. So somebody walks in your door and you don't know what language they're speaking, so you kind of have to figure out first how to talk to your new team member. So we experimented a lot with different tracking techniques for the tools that we wanted to use or thought we wanted to use. We did 3D tracking, we used Kinects, we did work with infrared frames and such things. And we had a test set up at one of our partners, Indot. They're doing prototypes in Lower Austria for us sometimes. And they also have a good connection to ABB, where the robots came from. So once we figured out how to talk to the robot, there was also the question of what tools we're gonna use to make this thing work. And there was, at the end, the pen or a spray can that we experimented the most with. And of course, we wanted to make sure that the robot actually has the skills to produce something that you can actually show afterwards, because it shouldn't look ugly, of course. It depends on the artist, though. So if you can't really draw, it looks like this. But we were quite satisfied with the results at first. And I have a little video here from the very first moment the robot was doing what we wanted him to do. It looked like this. I think they had too many fumes to inhale there as well. But yeah, so we were pretty satisfied that after, I think, almost 3 weeks of, really trying to hack this thing, because the most tricky part was for the colleague from ABB to tell the robot it's okay if you get to do something different every split of a millisecond, because robots are programmed to repeat everything perfectly. And once a standard robot program feels a difference in what the robot does, it stops working. So we had to tell the robot it's okay if you do this and then this and this and this, and it doesn't make sense to you. So, but we managed to convince the robot to keep working. So, oops. So we got back to Alex Kiesling, and he started his tests with the robot, and it was very interesting because he started to do what he wanted to do. He has this series, it's called Faces, and he wanted to create an artwork for this series. And we just made sure that our software was running smoothly so he can actually work with the robot. It was done in V4, the whole VVVV, the whole tracking part of it. And interestingly enough, Alex was really, looking forward to find an actual meaning in the whole collaboration with robots, and he realized he can actually create a triptych with his partners, his helpers, and finally we set it up in Vienna, London, and Berlin, and he was drawing 3 different single pictures that had connection points on each side, and the robots in the different cities got the data via satellite internet connection and created the same image. But funny enough, although a robot can do very, very precise things, as you can see in a minute, we had a little show-off program for the breaks as well. It's interesting that the drawings themselves weren't exact copies, because there were so many factors that changed. For example, the way the strokes were made. For example, in Berlin, it was way more moist because there was rain than in London. And so the pen and the paper reacted in a different way. Also, if you send data through space via satellite, sometimes little bits and pieces get dropped. So the strokes were very different, and at the end it was super interesting to see that you can actually tell which drawing was made by the robot in Berlin and by the robot in London. So they were, although it's the same robot with the same set of data, with the same setup, they created individual interpretations from the original drawing that Alex Kissling was doing in Vienna. And that whole thing created a big media buzz, actually, for the advertising people amongst you. In the end, there was a potential reach of 1.9 billion people with all the news outlets they were reaching for. And Alex Kissling, obviously, in Vienna were really happy about this because it kind of kicked off already a discussion of, of using robots or machines for art, and how if those things are duplicates, or if the whole piece is actually one artwork. So it was really interesting to see what happened after that event as well. And I just wanted to make a point with this whole thing. For us, it was interesting to see, basically we were only the enablers in this project, but it was interesting to see how Alex Kissling added this kind of unconventional technology to his creative process, and it forced him to really think about what he wanted to do, and he got really inspired by it. But of course, as we saw in this first project I showed you, technology like this, robots or any kind of new technology, could be a cool new app or some tool that you see. If you apply it on top of a great idea, it can make the project even nicer, because technology can make your ideas work, and we know at some point to get things done is really satisfying. And so as a solution, if you use it on top of your great idea, I think new technology, just like robots, is a great thing to add to your creative process. But also, if you think about the new technology as a part of your inspiration, as a source of inspiration, it is automatically challenging your creativity, because if you use something that you've never used before, you have to experiment, which is, I think, a very important part of a creative process. And you use something that you've never used before, and of course you will fail, and that will, of course, challenge your ideas and force you to open up your minds about what you're doing. So that's why I think robots was a great theme for today, to show you, that something that might not feel obvious in your process might help you to, realize things that you didn't think of, or actually find new ways of thinking about your creative process. And that's it. I say thank you, as well as our little robot friend, and thank you for listening.